Elaine Cougler is a Canadian author, and she's a well-known speaker and workshop leader as well. Elaine is a former high school teacher. She taught English and was a lifelong performer and singer. And at the end of all that, she took up writing in a very serious way. And Elaine has a brand new book, and it's very time appropriate. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But let's say hello to Elaine Cougler. Elaine, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's my pleasure.
You know, I think we should probably start at the beginning, and maybe you could talk to us about how you started writing. What launched this desire to put words to paper?
Well, I think I've always been a writer. I used to make up things, creative things with my classes and so on. And back in those days, we had homerooms, and so we got to know a certain class very, very well. And we did things at Christmas. And one year I did I can't think of the name of it, but the Santa Claus, a poem that we all know so well. And I took that poem and I put all my students in my homeroom, I put all their names into it. And, that's the kind of stuff I did. So I always wrote. But when I was 60, my son said to me, "Mom," he said, "you're 60 years old. Is there anything that you wish you had done that you haven't done?" And without even thinking, I said, "Write a novel." And a week, he said to me, "Well, basically, what are you waiting for?" and a week later, I was in Hilton Head, South Carolina, and I went into the Borders store and I bought a book that was called How to Write and Sell Your First Novel. And I was off and running, but it was my son that knows me so well. And that was the impetus.
That's a marvelous story, and certainly a good example for others that if you have that burning desire, don't wait around, just do it.
Yeah. I didn't even know that was in me. Very strange.
Now, as you've gone along, you've written a number of books by now. What is it that you love most about writing?
Well, I love that it lets me get into what I think is my heart. And I always love teaching. I love people, and I enjoy that kind of interaction and so on. So it wasn't that I was an unhappy person by any means. But when I got into writing, I realized that I was touching something in my soul. And if I would sit there and I'd be writing a story, in one of my books, I write a story about a baby dying, and I'm not going to say any more than that. But I knew it was a good scene because I was sitting there and the tears were going down my cheeks as I was writing. And so I felt if it could elicit that kind of emotion from me, that it was a good scene.
My goodness. What a lovely way to look at it, too. What is the most difficult part of writing?
I don't know that I find it very difficult in one way. People talk about writer's block and all that stuff, but I have my ways of getting past those things. I guess the most difficult thing is knowing what is going to be the next thing that you're going to write. I used to get annoyed when people would say, "Oh, well, I don't know." The writer would say, "I don't know what's going to be behind the door. A knock comes to the door and I don't know who's going to be there." And I used to think, "Oh, right. Well, funny thing. Hello, it happened to me." So yeah, it's just a discovery, I guess, and putting yourself in the mood to do that, I think. And what I have always done is work in the mornings. Well, that's my best time of day, and so I don't really have a lot of writer's block or or things like that. I guess I'm a talker.
One of the things that occurs to me, though, it must take some sort of discipline.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. But that's one of the benefits of being the age I am now, that if I want to get something done, I know that I have to, they have an expression in the writing world, and I don't know if I should actually say it, and you can edit it out if you like, but it's ass in chair. And I really think that's the thing. You just have to sit down and do it. And once you do that thing that is going to give you so much of a reward, once you do that thing, then the rest of your day just flies, Wonderful.
Now, having been a teacher of young people and loving them so much, if a youngster came to you and said they were interested in becoming a writer, what kind of advice might you give a young person?
Um, I would say that for most writers, the thing is that you have to have a way to support yourself outside of it. I mean, I was a teacher, so I'm fine, and I'm married, and so my husband and I have built a life together, and so on. And so it gives me the freedom to do the thing that makes my heart sing. And I think it's okay to establish yourself and do your writing on the side and so on. But it's very hard to be Terry Fallis or some of the other amazing writers we have here in Canada and across the world. It doesn't come easily. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
What was the first book that was published?
My first book was, and I even have the first cover. I changed the cover, but this is my first book. And you're going to get all kinds of reflection on that. But it's The Loyalist Wife. And I'm descended from United Empire Loyalists. And so I don't know, I don't actually remember deciding to write about the Loyalists, but it was fun because I found out a lot about my own family history at the same time. And it was a joy to me to start this because when I was in school, I did not like history, but history was taught, learn these facts, memorize this, what year did blah, blah, blah happen. And I mean, I was able to do all that stuff, but it wasn't exciting. But when you start to write about those historic events and how they impact the people, and of course, the immediate people in my books are fiction, and I'm able to show what happened when Governor Simcoe came here to what was not even Canada yet. And I'm able to show what happened to our Native peoples at that time and how they weren't allowed to buy property. They had to go on the reservations. And of course, I realize that we're suffering from those decisions a couple of 100 years ago now. So I find history very exciting now, but because it's about what happens to the people.
Now, did that first book lead to the Loyalist trilogy?
Yes. I started out to write one book, and then as I was nearing the end of that, I thought, well, I know where they're going. I know what's going to happen in the next book and the next book. And then during COVID, I wrote a prequel, and kind of
The Loyalist Daughter.
The Loyalist Daughter. And I took Lucy, who's the main character in the Loyalist trilogy, and I took her back to Boston. And a couple of years before the American Revolutionary War, and she's 14 and walking on the docks in Boston, and I think it was called the Long Wharf. And she and her father are walking, and all of a sudden these men come running out, and they're all dressed in funny costumes as though they're native peoples, but they're not. And they get in rowboats and they row out to a British ship that's sitting in the harbor, and they climb up and they dump tea overboard. And so that's how I started that book, with the Boston Tea Party as it came to be known. So again, well, you just kind of connect it to what would the ordinary people be thinking.
Yeah. Wonderful stuff. Now, a very different book that you did was called The Man Behind the Marathons. And this is about Dr. Ron Calhoun. And he worked with Terry Fox and others in raising millions of dollars for charity. I'm fascinated to know, how on earth did that book come about?
Well, Ron asked me a couple of times if I would write that book, but I was up to my ears in the Loyalist trilogy. And so I turned him down. And then I got to a point, and he asked me again. And I said, you know, Ron, I think we could do this. Now, you're wondering, how did I know Ron Calhoun? Well, my mother and Ron Calhoun were both, he's from Oxford County, where I grew up. And they were both great volunteers in the Canadian Cancer Society. And so I had met him at my parents' farm and so on. And so I knew this man and had such regard for him. So we had a good time sitting at my dining room table, and I would ask him questions and he would tell me stories. And it took us 2 years, and I ended up with this amazing book about a man who deserves to be revered in this country and across the world, and he is.
Well, I must say it was a huge success. It was a #1 bestseller on Amazon, and was also got the Book of Excellence Finalist Award. What a nice compliment to all that effort over 2 years. You must be pretty happy with that.
Well, especially for Ron, because, there's good people out there. And today it's hard to remember that sometimes if you turn on the media and so on, because a lot of the media like to concentrate on the negative stuff.
Yeah.
I really have made it my life's business the last few years to go downtown, talk to people, and people are great. People are good. They're not what you see on the news. Yes, there are some of those, but most of them are really wonderful people and deserve to have their stories told.
How true.
And it's that kind of man.
Well, that leads us to talk about your brand new book, which is called Canada, Brave New World. And in this book, it's an anthology full of immigrant stories of people who've come to Canada to escape their circumstances in their home country. And you have documented what their contributions have meant to Canada. That sounds like a huge undertaking. Tell us how this book came about.
You would think when you ask other people to have, to submit stories and so on, you would think that would make it a lot easier. No. So yeah, it turned out to be a huge undertaking, but a wonderful undertaking. And it does, I sound a little bit Pollyanna-ish here, I think, but it's my personal philosophy is, again, that there are a lot of good people out there, and that people will rise to the occasion if the circumstances warrant it. And over and over, we've got about 27 stories in this new book. And some of them I wrote because I knew those immigrant stories, and no one in their family was a writer. And I went and interviewed. So I don't know, I did about 5 or 6 stories myself. But most of them are written by people who either are professional writers and they wrote in certain styles and so on, and that's wonderful, or they are family members who wanted to tell their own family stories. And so they're long, they're short. One of them is from a man whom I got to know in the London Writers Society. And his book, he had 3 books that he had published and still owned the rights to. And he condensed, so that there's probably about 50 pages in my book of Rudy's story. But he was a child in Germany, in Nazi Germany, in the Second World War. And his father was, he was a peace-loving man and did not want to fight on anybody's side and so on. And he ran afoul of the Nazi party, and they punished him by sending him into the army, and they put him in a thing that they hoped, I think, that he would be killed, you know, frontline fodder sort of thing. And it's an amazing story. Rudy had his parents' letters to each other during this time.
Wow.
And so that was two of the books. And then the third book was Rudy's book as an immigrant coming to Canada and so on. It is an eye-opener for people who grew up when you know, lovely television and so on. We grew up with the television, and we watched things like Hogan's Heroes that made the German people look like they were idiots, and so on. And I love these stories because it shows me that it doesn't matter what language you speak or what country you come from, people are people. And you will enjoy Rudy Zimmer's stories.
Must have been a pretty emotional journey, documenting all these stories and putting the book together.
Yes, absolutely. But one that I'm really excited about. And I mean, I didn't write all these stories, but I'm so excited to be bringing them out for people. I think we in Canada have to look at our heritage and tell the truth about our heritage.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, those people that came here and they made Canada what it is today, and they're still doing it. We have people coming, and you just have to get inside their heads and find out what they're like. And I hope my book encourages people to do that.
Now, I understand a number of these people are going to be in attendance at your book launch, which is coming up in early June.
They are, and I'm very excited about that. One of the stories in the book is the lead-off story, and I chose it for that because of my personal excitement about this whole thing. In 1980, I was a teacher of English as a second language for what we called then the boat people from Vietnam. And I taught a class full of those people, and I became very close to a number of them. One couple is going to be there with their family, and I'll leave the story. You can see I'm kind of almost choking up a little bit on it, but I'll leave the story for people to read in the book. But when I asked Nia and Hong if they were coming, they said yes. They were definitely going to have 7 people with them, and they might have 12, I think it was.
Wow.
But this young couple came here, worked hard to pay the money to bring their family. They have brought 40 members of their families here.
My goodness, that's an amazing sub-story. It really is. It really is. Now, Elaine, if the people after the launch date want to get a copy of your book, how will people be able to get this brand new book called Canada, Brave New World?
Well, I'm really glad you asked that. I always put my books on Amazon because it's a pretty good platform for people to reach from wherever. So it'll be there in print and in Kindle. And then I also put it on the Kobo site because Canadians, a lot of Canadians are on Kobo. I haven't decided whether I'm going to do an audiobook of this one yet. I've done an audiobook of all my other books. And one librarian, when I asked her if she thought I should do this, and she doesn't really know me that well, and she said, Elaine, after you left the other day, we decided that we could listen to you read the whole book. So I thought, okay.
That's wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
Elaine, good luck with this brand new book, and thanks for sharing your story. It's a story of encouragement. It's a story of it's an uplifting story for all of us to take to heart, and we thank you for sharing it with us today.
Thank you so much.
Elaine Cougler is a Canadian author, well-known speaker, and workshop leader, and was our guest today.